correctness. Chapter 3. Europeans. 1. Intelligence of indigenous Europeans. 2. Europeans outside Europe. 3. European university students. 4. Brain size. 5. The heritability of intelligence in Europeans. Europeans have been recognized by all the classical anthropologists as one of the major races. Linnaeus described them as Europaeus. They have frequently been designated Caucasians or Caucasoids because of the belief that they originated in the Caucasus. A number of anthropologists have categorized them together with the South Asians and North Africans in a single Caucasoid group. However, the Europeans are distinguishable from the South Asians and North Africans by their lighter skin color, and, in the Northern Europeans, blonde hair and blue eyes. The distinction between the Europeans and the South Asians and North Africans has been confirmed by Cavalli Sforza, Minozzi, and Piazza in their classification of the human races on the basis of a number of genetic markers. This has shown that Europeans represented by Italians, Danes, English, and Basques comprise a homogeneous cluster, differentiating them from other races. Kuhn, Garn, and Birdsell-Cole, and a number of other anthropologists have subdivided the Europeans into 7 sub-races consisting of the Mediterranean peoples of Spain, Italy, and Southeast Europe, the Alpine peoples of France and Central and Southern Germany, the Nordic peoples of England, the east of Ireland and Scotland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Northern Germany, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Western Finland, the Celtic peoples of Wales, the west of Ireland, and the Western Highlands of Scotland, the Dinaric peoples of East Central Europe, the Slavic peoples of northern Poland, the Baltic states, and Russia, west of the Urals, and the Basques of northern Spain and southwest France. The Nordic peoples have lighter skin color, blonde hair, and blue eyes, while the Central and South Europeans more typically have darker skins, darker or black hair, and dark eyes. 1. Intelligence of indigenous Europeans. Studies of the IQs of Europeans in Europe are summarized in Table 3.1. These IQs are calculated in relation to a British mean of 100 and standard deviation of 15. 21 of the studies were carried out by Buge on samples of adults from major cities. Most, if the remainder, are derived from one of the 3 versions of the progressive matrices. Row 61, giving an IQ of 89 for Serbia, is probably a shade too low because the sample is described as being from predominantly lower or lower middle-class families in and around Belgrade. The range of IQs of the Europeans is from 87 for one of the studies in Ireland and 88% for one of the studies in Greece to 107 for one of the studies in Germany and the Netherlands. There are also some inconsistencies in the same countries where the IQs typically differ by 2 or 3 IQ points, and in the cases of Portugal and Poland by as much as 13 and 14 IQ points. These differences are partly caused by sampling errors and are partly genuine, arising from differences in living standards and possibly from subracial differences in Europe. Sampling errors in studies of the intelligence of national populations arise in the same way as in opinion polls on voting intentions, where normally several polls carried out at the same time give results that differ by a few percentage points. We should not search for the meaning of differences of a few IQ points between studies when in many cases these are simply sampling errors. The important thing is to look for general patterns. The only significant general pattern of the IQs in Europe appears to be that IQs are a little lower in Southeast Europe than in the remainder. In the Balkans, IQs are 94% for Romania, 92.5 for Bulgaria, 90 for Croatia, 89 for Serbia, and 92.5 for Greece. The probable explanation for this is that the Balkan peoples are a hybrid population or cline, comprising a genetic mix between the Europeans and South Asians in Turkey. Hybrid populations or clines arise in the borderlands between 2 races as a result of interbreeding. In the Balkans, such a cline evolved because of the close geographical proximity between Southeast Europe and Turkey, and the occupation of large territories in Southeast Europe by Turkey for a number of centuries during the time of the Ottoman Empire. This has brought about a mixing of Turkish and European genes, with the result that contemporary Turks and Greeks are genetically quite similar. This has been shown by Cavalli Sforza, Minozzi, and Piazza in their genetic linkage tree, in which Greeks are shown to be more closely related to Iranians and other Southwest Asian peoples than to Italians, Danes, and English. This genetic similarity is also apparent for intelligence, for which the IQ of 90 in Turkey is closely similar to those in the range of 90 to 94 in Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia in Southeast Europe. Because the peoples of Southeast Europe are Klein, it is considered appropriate to exclude these in estimating the European IQ. The median IQ of the remaining countries is 99% and is considered the best estimate of the IQ of Europeans. Apart from the lower IQs in the Balkans, there are 3 other countries with IQs somewhat lower than the European average. The first is Lithuania with an IQ of 90 to 92. These low figures may be sampling errors because they are rather lower than in neighboring Russia, Poland, and Estonia. The second is Ireland, for which the mean IQ of the 4 studies is 92. The most probable explanation for this is the long history of emigration, in which there has been some tendency for the more intelligent to migrate, leaving the less intelligent behind. This has also occurred in Scotland, where the average IQ is 97, and in Corsica, where the average IQ is lower than in mainland France. The third country with a slightly depressed IQ is Portugal, for which the 2 results are IQs of 101 and 88, which can be averaged to 94.5. The depressed IQ in Portugal is consistent with its having the lowest per capita income in Western Europe and its modest intellectual achievement. The Portuguese have only won 1 Nobel Prize for Science out of the 346 awarded during the period 1901 to 2003. This was awarded in 1949 to the neurosurgeon Antonio Moniz for the innovation of the operation of prefrontal leucotomy as a treatment for mental illness, and is not now considered a desirable therapy. It may be that intelligence in Portugal has been depressed by the admixture of sub-Saharan Africans in the population. Portugal was the only European country to import black slaves from the late 15th century onwards for agricultural and domestic work. According to Du Bois, in the 16th century, blacks outnumbered whites in Lisbon and in the plantations of the Algarve in the south of the country. This may be an exaggeration, and it may be that the proportion of blacks has declined in succeeding centuries. Nevertheless, if the present population of Portugal contains 20% of African descent, and the IQ of the Africans is 70, this would be expected to produce a population with an IQ of 94. It may be surprising that there does not appear to be much difference between IQs in the 12 former communist countries of Eastern Europe, among which the median IQ is 96, and the 14 countries of Western Europe, among which the median is 98.5%. The difference is small and not statistically significant, so it seems that although the former communist countries have had much lower living standards for some 60 years following the end of World War II, this has not impaired the intelligence of the populations. Table 3.1. IQs of indigenous Europeans. 2. Europeans outside Europe. Europeans have migrated to many parts of the world. Studies of the intelligence of these populations are summarized in Table 3.2, rows 1 and 2. Give IQs of 93 and 98 for Argentina. Row 3 gives an IQ of 97 for Australia based on a standardization of the American Otis test. Row 4 gives an IQ of 100 for Australia derived from the administration of the SPM to national servicemen. The IQ of this sample was 102, but because men obtain higher. Table 3.2. IQs of Europeans outside Europe. Mean IQs than women by approximately 5 IQ points on this test. The figure has been reduced to 100. Row 5 gives an IQ of 98 for a sample of young Australian children. Row 6 gives an IQ of 95 for European children in Brazil from Sao Paulo. Row 7 gives an IQ of 97 for Canada, obtained from a sample of 7 to 12-year-olds. Row 8 gives an IQ of 100 for Canada obtained from the standardization of the WISC 111 on a representative sample of 2,206 to 16-year-olds. Row 9 gives an IQ of 99 for Chile, based on a study finding that European students at the Universidad Católica de Valparaíso had the same IQ as Austrian students. Row 10 gives an IQ of 95 for European children in Colombia. Row 11 gives an IQ of 98 for European children in Baja California and Mexico. Row 12 gives an IQ of 99 for New Zealand, obtained from a standardization of the Otis test in the 1930s. Row 13 gives an IQ of 101, derived from the standardization of the progressive matrices. Row 14 gives an IQ of 102 obtained from the Christchurch Child Development Study. Row 15 gives an IQ of 94 for European 16-year-olds in Natal in South Africa. Rows 16 through 21 give 6 IQs in the range between 99 and 103 for Europeans in the United States compared with those in Britain. The IQ of 100 given in row 20 is derived from the standardization of the WISC 3 in Britain. Row 22 gives an IQ of 96 from a standardization of the progressive matrices in Uruguay. Row 23 gives an IQ of 100 for European 7-year-olds in Zimbabwe. The median of these IQs is 99, the same as that of Europeans in Europe. The results show that even in the quite poor countries of Latin America, which have per capita incomes about 1/3 of those in North America and Western Europe, the IQs of Europeans are only fractionally below those in affluent nations. This confirms the results in Europe, where the much poorer former communist countries have about the same IQs as the affluent Western countries. 3. European university students. Studies of the intelligence of European university students are summarized in Table 3.3. All the samples have IQs of 100 or above, as would be expected, and the median IQ is 105. The principal interest of the results is for comparison with university students in Africa and South Asia, where IQs are typically about 10 to 20 points lower. Table 3.3. Intelligence of European university students. 4. Brain size. We noted in Section 1 that IQs are lower in Southeast Europe and in the Iberian Peninsula than in the remainder of Europe. We would expect that these differences would also be present in brain size because of the correlation between brain size and intelligence of 0.40. We look now at differences within subpopulations of Europeans to see whether this is the case. The data on brain sizes of a large number of populations collected by Jurgens, Ahn, and Pieper are shown in Table 3.4 together with IQs. Row 1 shows that Europeans in North America have the largest brain size and IQ. Row 2 shows that these are followed by Europeans in North, Central, and Eastern Europe. Row 3 shows slightly smaller brain size and IQ in Spain and Portugal. Row 4 shows a continuation of the downward trend, with smaller brain size and IQ in Southeast Europe. Row 5 shows a further continuation of the downward trend, with smaller brain size and IQ in the Near East obtained from samples of South Asians from Turkey and Iraq. Row 6 shows the lowest brain size and IQ in South Asians in India. Details of the IQs of the South Asians in Turkey, Iraq, and India are given in Chapter 6. Table 3.4. Brain size and intelligence in Europeans and South Asians. 5. The heritability of intelligence in Europeans. The heritability of intelligence is the extent to which differences in intelligence are determined by genetic factors. We are interested here in the question of the heritability of race differences in intelligence. But before discussing this, we need to consider the heritability of individual differences in intelligence within countries. There are 3 sources of evidence on this problem. These consist of studies of identical twins reared apart, a comparison of identical and non-identical twins reared in the same families, and a comparison of unrelated adopted children reared in the same families. All 3 kinds of evidence show that the heritability of intelligence for adults is approximately 0.80, or 80%. This means that if all individuals were reared in identical environments, the differences between individuals would be reduced to 80% of the actual differences. Studies on the heritability of intelligence for adults and children have been summarized by Bouchard. For adults, the evidence from identical twins reared apart is based on 5 studies for which the average correlation weighted by sample size is 0.75. This figure needs to be corrected for test reliability, for which a reasonable figure is about 0.9. Bouchard, 1993, P49, McIntosh, 1998. This correction increases the correlation to 0.83. This is a measure of the heritability. The evidence from a comparison of the degree of similarity between identical twins and same-sex, non-identical twins brought up in the same families is that there is a correlation of 0.88 for identical twins and 0.51 for same-sex non-identicals. Correcting the correlations for the reliability of the tests and adopting a reliability coefficient of 0.9, the corrected correlations become 0.9%, 8 for identicals, and 0.5% for same-sex non-identicals. The heritability can be calculated by Falconer's formula, consisting of doubling the difference between the correlations of identical and same-sex non-identicals. The difference between the two correlations is 0.42, and doubling this difference gives a heritability of 0.84. A third method for estimating the heritability of intelligence is to examine the correlation between the IQs of unrelated children adopted and reared in the same families. The magnitude of the adopted family environmental effect is expressed by the correlation between the twin pairs. The summary of the research literature by Bouchard concludes that among adults the correlation is 0.04, indicating a heritability of 0.96. However, this method underestimates the environmental effect because it does not take into account effects operating on one child but not on the other, such as prenatal and perinatal effects. The two twin methods yielding heritabilities of intelligence of 0.83 and 0.8% are more accurate. These figures are very close to the estimate of approximately 0.8% given by Jensen. The heritability of intelligence among children is considerably lower, at approximately 0.4% among 4 to 6-year-olds, and 0.55 for the age group 6 to 20. The reason for this is probably that parents exert environmental effects on children that progressively wear off during adolescence. It is by including the lower heritability figures derived from children with the higher figures for adults that some scholars put the heritability of intelligence at between around 0.40 to 0.80. For instance, in a statement drawn up by Gottfredson and endorsed by 52 experts, it is stated that heritability estimates range from 0.4% to 0.8%, most indicating that genetics plays a bigger role than environment in creating IQ differences among individuals. Most of the studies from which these high heritability figures are obtained come from Europeans and affluent Western nations. However, a study of 144 identical and non-identical twin pairs in Russia yielded a heritability of 0.78, which corrected for test unreliability is increased to 0.87. The conclusion that intelligence has a high heritability implies that there are genes that determine intelligence. The first of these in normal populations was discovered in the late 1990s by Chorley et al. It lies on chromosome 6, and possession of one of the alleles of this gene contributes about 4 IQ points to an individual's